The red boots, I found them at an estate sale in a small Massachusetts town I was passing through on a road trip. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and outsiders are noticed immediately. The house was a Victorian monster, 3 stories of gabled roofs and peeling paint, with a widow's walk that seemed to peer out at the grey Atlantic in the distance. The previous owner had died without family, so everything was being sold off. Amateur treasure hunters and antique dealers picked through the remnants of someone's life, haggling over old furniture and costume jewelry. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just killing time before continuing my drive to Boston. That's when I saw them in the corner of the attic, a pair of children's red boots. They were old-fashioned, the kind with buttons up the side instead of laces, made of bright red leather that hadn't faded despite what must have been decades in storage. They were small, probably made for a child of 5 or 6, and sitting by themselves on an otherwise empty shelf. How much for these? I asked the tired-looking woman managing the sale. She glanced at the boots, and something passed across her face. Hesitation, maybe concern, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Take them," she said. "No charge." I should have found that strange, but I was too pleased with my free find. I collected vintage clothes, and these boots would make a perfect display piece in my apartment. I thanked her and slipped them into my tote bag. As I was leaving, an elderly man with a cane stopped me at the front door. His gnarled hand gripped my arm with surprising strength. "Those red boots," he said, his eyes watery but intense. "You took them." It wasn't a question. I nodded, suddenly uncomfortable. "They belonged to Eliza Wheeler," he continued, "back in 1922. She loved those boots so much she refused to take them off, even to sleep." "That's a cute story," I said, trying to extricate myself from his grip. "She was wearing them when she disappeared." They found the boots a month later by the edge of Mason's Woods. His eyes held mine. But they never found Eliza. A chill ran through me despite the warm summer air. The woman who'd been running the sale appeared behind him. "Dad, don't bother the customers with old stories," she said, gently pulling him away. To me, she added, "Sorry about that. He loves telling the local legends." I smiled weakly and hurried to my car, tossing my bag onto the passenger seat. As I drove away, I watched the old house recede in my rearview mirror, the widow's walk seeming to follow my departure. That night, I checked into a motel about 100 miles up the coast. After showering, I remembered the boots and took them out of my bag, curious to examine my unusual souvenir more closely. Under the harsh fluorescent lighting of the motel room, the red leather seemed even brighter, almost unnaturally so. The boots were in remarkable condition for their age, with only slight creasing around the ankles and toes, as if they'd barely been worn. I counted 14 tiny buttons on each boot, all intact. As I turned one over, I noticed something written inside in faded ink. Eliza W. So the old man's story had some truth to it. Okay. I felt another chill but dismissed it. Plenty of children's items had names written in them, especially in earlier times when such things were often passed down. I placed the boots on the dresser and went to bed, falling asleep almost immediately after the long day of driving. The sound of footsteps woke me, small, light steps moving across the motel room floor. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. I lay frozen in bed, my heart racing. The steps didn't sound like an adult's. They were too light, too childlike. Tap, tap, tap. They were moving around the perimeter of the room. I forced myself to turn my head toward the sound. In the dim glow of the parking lot lights filtering through the thin curtains, I could see nothing but the shadowy outlines of furniture. The dresser, the TV, the chair by the window. The footsteps stopped. Then I saw them, the red boots. They weren't on the dresser anymore. They were in the middle of the floor, positioned as if someone were standing in them, facing my bed. I must have fallen asleep and knocked them off, I told myself, or maybe the motel was on an incline, and they had slid off on their own. There were plenty of rational explanations. I climbed out of bed, grabbed the boots, and shoved them deep into my bag, zipping it closed. Then I climbed back into bed, pulling the covers up despite the warm night. Just before falling back asleep, I could have sworn I heard a child giggling. The next morning, I convinced myself it had all been a dream. The boots were still in my bag where I'd left them. I continued my drive to Boston, checking into a proper hotel downtown, grateful for the anonymity of the city after the unsettling experience in that small coastal town. After unpacking, I set the boots on the windowsill of my room, 19 floors above the street. They made for a striking display against the city skyline, the red leather catching the afternoon sun. I spent the day sightseeing, had dinner at a nice restaurant, and returned to my hotel room pleasantly exhausted. As I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something odd. One of the boots on the windowsill was lying on its side. I was sure I'd left them both standing upright. I righted the boot and went to bed, falling into a deep sleep around 3 a.m. I jerked awake with the absolute certainty that someone was in the room with me. I lay still, listening intently, hearing nothing but the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then it started again. Tap, dash, tap, dash, tap. Pause, tap, tap, tap. Small footsteps moving across the hotel carpet. This isn't real, I whispered to myself. This is not happening. The footsteps stopped abruptly. Then, softly at first but growing louder, came the sound of a child humming. It was a tune I didn't recognize, something old-fashioned and slightly off-key. I fumbled for the bedside lamp, my fingers clumsy with fear. When the light came on, I saw them, the red boots in the middle of the room, facing me just as they had been in the motel. But this time, I could see faint indentations in the carpet around them, as if invisible feet were shifting their weight from side to side. The humming continued. "What do you want?" My voice came out as barely more than a whimper. The humming stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then a child's voice, sweet but somehow wrong, spoke from the empty space above the boots. "I want my boots back." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The air in the room felt heavy and cold, despite the summer heat outside. "They're yours," I managed to say. "Take them." A giggle, high and eerie. "I can't take them back. You'll have to give them back." "How? How do I give them back?" The voice dropped to a whisper. "Where they found them. By the edge of Mason's Woods. That's where they took them from me." "Who took them from you?" But there was no answer. The boots suddenly toppled over, as if whatever had been standing in them had disappeared. The temperature in the room returned to normal almost instantly. I didn't sleep again that night. As soon as dawn broke, I checked out of the hotel and began the drive back to the coastal town. I'd planned to spend a week in Boston, but now all I wanted was to get rid of those boots and return home. It was nearly noon when I arrived back in the town. It looked different in the bright daylight, less quaint, more warm. I stopped at a local diner and asked an older waitress if she knew where Mason's Woods was. She paused while pouring my coffee. "Mason's Woods. That's private property now, part of the Hendricks estate. Why do you ask?" I hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. I heard an old story about a girl who disappeared there long ago, Eliza Wheeler. The waitress put down the coffee pot. "Who have you been talking to?" Her tone had changed, become defensive. "Just, someone mentioned it at the estate sale yesterday. The old Victorian house." She nodded slowly. "Wheeler House. That was Eliza's family home. Her parents died years ago. The house has changed hands many times since then. Nobody seems to stay long." She leaned closer. "Where'd you hear about Eliza specifically?" That's not a story most folks around here tell outsiders. I described the old man who'd stopped me. The waitress straightened up. That would be Harold Parker. He's got his own ideas about what happened to Eliza. Most people believe she just got lost in the woods and died of exposure. It was November, cold that year, but they never found her. She shook her head. Just those red boots of hers, sitting neat as you please at the edge of the woods. And where exactly are Mason's Woods? She gave me directions reluctantly, warning me again that it was private property now, and that the Hendricks family didn't take kindly to trespassers. I thanked her, paid for my untouched coffee, and left. Mason's Woods turned out to be about 3 miles outside of town, a dense stretch of forest bordering an impressive modern house set back from the road. A wrought iron fence surrounded the property, with no trespassing signs every few yards. I parked my car on the shoulder of the road and took the red boots from my bag. Now what? I couldn't exactly hop the fence in broad daylight. I decided to wait until nightfall. I drove back to town, killed time at a local bookstore, and returned after dark. The area was deserted. The Hendricks house was lit up in the distance, but the woods themselves were a wall of darkness. I got out of my car quietly, boots in hand, and approached the fence. Just as I was wondering how to get over it, I noticed a section that had been damaged, perhaps by a fallen branch. It was bent outward just enough that I might be able to squeeze through, heart pounding. I slipped through the gap and made my way toward the tree line. The night was clear but moonless, making it difficult to see where I was going. At the edge of the woods, I hesitated. What exactly was I supposed to do? Just leave the boots here. Eliza, I whispered, feeling foolish. I brought your boots back. Nothing happened. No voice, no footsteps, just the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. I placed the boots on the ground, side by side, facing the woods. I'm sorry, I added, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. As I turned to leave, the wind picked up suddenly, cold and sharp despite the summer night. I heard a soft tap-tap behind me, but I didn't look back. I ran for the fence, squeezed through the gap, and dove into my car. As I started the engine, my headlights swept across the edge of the woods. For just a moment, I thought I saw a small figure in an old-fashioned dress standing there, the red boots on her feet. Then my lights moved on, and there was nothing but trees. I drove straight through the night, not stopping until I was 3 states away. That was 2 months ago. I've tried to put it behind me, to tell myself it was all just stress and suggestion and an overactive imagination. Sometimes I almost believe it. But last week, I received a small package in the mail. No return address, just my name and address in shaky, elderly handwriting. Inside was a yellowed newspaper clipping from November 1922, with the headline, "Local child still missing, boots found." There was a grainy photograph of a solemn little girl in a white dress. Even in the black and white photo, you could tell her boots were bright. Paperclipped to the article was a note. "She's been looking for a friend. She'll visit you again. HP." At night now, I sometimes wake to the sound of tap-tapped outside my bedroom door. I keep it locked, but I know that won't stop her. After all, she just wants someone to play with. Someone who noticed her boots and thought they were special. I should never have taken something that wasn't mine, especially something so cherished that its owner would cross the boundary between life and death to get it back. So, if you're ever in a small town on the Massachusetts coast, and you happen upon an estate sale in an old Victorian house, remember my story. And no matter how tempting they might appear, leave the little red boots where they are.